Gonna go to Tashi's station for power converters. Now I guess I'm going nowhere. It just isn't fair. Wookie. 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 Someone move this walking carpet. 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 Kiss your brother, kiss your brother, kiss your brother, kiss your brother.
Well, I guess you don't know anything about women.
Kiss your brother, kiss your brother, kiss your brother. Who's your daddy? Who's your daddy?
Who's your daddy? Who's your daddy? Luke, I'm your father. It is useless to resist. Come with me, my son, we will rule. Search your feelings, it is true. So you have a twin sister who Obi-Wan was wise to hide. If you will not turn, then perhaps she will give in to your hate. You are mine.
Far, far away, long time ago, far, far away.
Kiss a Wookiee,
Kiss a Wookiee,
fly the falcon, on asteroid, till the princess is alone.
She's annoyed. This is spaceships, it's monsters, it's Star Wars, we love it, it's true. Episode 3, 2005. So let's go, stand in the line, cause it's almost the time.
Join the dark side.
May the Force be with you. Oh.
How you guys doing today? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Let's see. So, how do I mute Kahoot? All right, mute site. So today, it looks like nobody else is going to be joining us. I thought Akosa would be. She's in your class as well, but I think she had to work. So today we are going to be practicing the contextualization skill from our essays, and we're going to be using the content of Star Wars to do that. So first and foremost, I was going to use a PDF of the PowerPoint because whenever I upload a PowerPoint to this, it likes to get rid of all my fonts. And something I learned about me is that I'm a man who loves his fonts. Okay, so instead I'm going to do a screen share. So which one do they consider first monitor? It's such a first world problem to have so many monitors that you just don't know which one is first. Nope, wrong monitor. Okay, stop sharing. Share my screen. Second monitor. Share. Nope, wrong monitor. So apparently the one all the way on my left is the third monitor. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so can you guys see the contextualization in space, or were the Alliance rebels or terrorists PowerPoint? Awesome. Cool, cool, cool. So by the way, if you don't feel like typing out yes or indeed or any kind of response, if you go up to the little guy at the top who seems to be raising his hand, and you click on the down arrow, you can click, there's some other options there. Agree, disagree. You can also tell me to speak louder or speak softer. I've never once in my life been told to speak louder, so I highly doubt you'll ever use that one. But yeah, there are just some options there for responding. Okay? Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So first, let's take a look at the concepts. I did not throw a WAP one up there because they don't have one explicitly about terrorism. And you guys are all in Euro anyways, so that doesn't matter for us. But there are some state standards for learning about domestic and foreign terrorism, as well as a key concept that I thought applied. This is all the way up in period 4, which you guys aren't at yet, but we're going to see time and time again throughout European history where national groups and separatist movements are going to cause strife and conflict and, you know, sometimes terror in their efforts to break away from imperialist control. So, yeah, that's kind of our background there, our standards, what we're aiming for. So let's think about why we're even bothering to learn about contextualization in the first place. So contextualization, as you know, is one of the points on our rubric. It's also one of our historical thinking skills. The very first one, in fact, in the curriculum framework. So the College Board, this is actually from the curriculum framework from the College Board itself, and they break down contextualization into 3 different parts. First, there's a describe, and you have to be able to accurately provide a historical context for a particular development or process. So, for instance, if we're talking about the Italian Renaissance, you have to be accurate in providing a context for the Renaissance. It can't just be so broad that it could apply to anything. Especially in Euro, the band is a little narrower or more narrow for context than it would be in AP World, where everything happening around the globe is pertinent at the time. So you have to describe, then you have to explain how that context influenced the historical development or process. Meaning, you can't just say, well, at the same time as the Italian Renaissance, there was a price of tea in China. I don't know if you guys remember that old saying, but what's that got to do with the price of tea in China? You have to say what the context is, then explain how that broader context influenced the specific thing, and then you have to use that context to explain the relative historical significance of that development or process. Okay? Pretty complicated stuff, a lot to it. That's why not everybody gets this point, but we're going to cover that in a little bit more depth today with a few more examples. And we're going to have a little bit of Star Wars-y fun. Are you guys Star Wars fans? Do you know Star Wars? I'd be surprised how often I get students who don't. Stefan is a big green check. Lucas, are you a... Oh, okay. Yes, indeed. Good. Me too. Alright, so we have got a copy of the rubric here. Now, I know you might notice that it says APUSH, but don't worry. Those of you who've taken APUSH, you might notice that it's the same grading rubric for the essays. But contextualization is not a point that I give very often, at least in the first half of the year. As soon as you guys attend one of these things and start practicing it, really, you're going to start nailing it. And really, on the DBQ, out of 7 points, a 4 is a great score. If you were to get a 4 on the DBQ, a 3 on an LEQ, and like 60% of the multiple choice, you're on a great track for a 5. So, it's not a point for everybody. It is a little complicated to get. You can be completely stymied on exam day if you sit down and you just cannot, for the life of you, put the 2 dots together for your context. But there are a few tips and tricks for making that a little bit easier, and I think by the end of the year, you guys are just going to be nailing it. Okay, so 4 out of 7 on the DBQ would be great. The really difficult parts, so we've got your thesis point, which you should be getting. You're a high schooler. You should, by this point in your life, be nailing the thesis in everything you write. Using the documents to, describing the documents, just 3 of them gets you a point. Supporting your argument with the documents, using 6 of them, that should be pretty easy by now. So, and then, of course, using the outside historical evidence, that you just have to come up with one fact, and then provide kind of a similar thing as this context with that fact. Okay, so those are the 4 easy ones, right? And then you've got the harder ones, context, point of view for the documents, and then the complex understanding, which is so complex that I would bet all of the money I had that if I had to take the exam with you guys this year, I wouldn't get the complex understanding point. They just sent out a survey last week to all the AP teachers asking if we would prefer that they keep the point and explain better how to earn the point, or if it would be better just to get rid of that point altogether. I voted for get rid of it, because it used to be synthesis, and you can still do synthesis, but only like 2% of students are getting that. So, contextualization is also one of the harder points for the LEQ. We won't go into as much detail with that. So let's talk about what is context. This is the beginning of the story. You're not starting in the middle of the action and the reader has to figure it out as they go along what in the world you're talking about. Okay? So let's take Empire, which is the best Star Wars film. If you disagree with me, I will change your grade to an F. Okay? I'm kidding, I won't do that. This is being recorded and somebody might see this. I will not do that, is my official statement. Alright, so let's take a look at Empire. You know, the scroll that happens at the beginning of each of the Star Wars movies. So this is the way that Star Wars introduces The Empire Strikes Back. Take a second just to read that. Alright, so they are providing a general but still sort of specific background and context for the opening of the movie. If they just opened the movie, right, panning over the Arctic wasteland of Hoth, you'd be like, why in the world are they on an ice planet, you know? And you wouldn't know. You're like, hey, they blew up the Death Star in 4, why are they still fighting the Empire? I thought they beat them. Okay? So they provide you with a little bit of the general context about what's been going on. And think of it like this inverted pyramid kind of shape, kind of like the feudal structure from world history. You're going to want to aim for 2 to 3 good sentences, the very opening of your story. And I like to start with something very general about the time period, and then start to narrow it down to the topic. So let's say that you are writing about Louis XIV's absolutism, right? You're going to start, your first sentence should be about the time period, okay, which is end of period 1, beginning of period 2, looking at 15, 16, 1700s. And you're going to talk about the shift towards absolutism as a whole. And then you want to get a little bit narrower with your next sentence, maybe introduce France and talk about what's happening in France at that time. And then your next sentence should be probably about absolute monarchs. And then that's when you segue into your thesis statement, which is specifically about Louis XIV, if that makes sense. Alright, so here's where the Star Wars School does that. Okay? Notice how specific they are. Evading the dreaded Imperial Starfleet, a group of freedom fighters, that phrase is going to be important later, led by Luke Skywalker. Anyone else notice the fact that they say that it's led by Luke Skywalker and he's just a commander? I mean, at this point he's outranked by Han, as well as Leia, so I don't understand why they say that. Anyways, Luke Skywalker has established a new secret base on the remote ice world of Hoth. The evil Lord Vader, obsessed with finding young Skywalker, has dispatched thousands of remote probes into the far reaches of space. Okay, so you see how they're talking about things on a galactic level in the first sentence. In the next level, they're talking about what's going on specifically on Hoth, and then they narrow it down to introduce that action, and we have that probe going across the Arctic wasteland. Does that make sense? Let's do a little comprehension check here. I had some green checks from Lucas and Stefan. We're good to go. Alright, so I don't know if you guys have heard the phrase, he can't see the forest for the trees, meaning that a person's so focused specifically on the tree in front of them that they don't realize that they're standing in front of a whole forest. That they can't see, it's a metaphor meaning that they can't see the broader context of things because they're so focused on the specific. When you write a contextualization, it needs to be both. You need to go from an overview of the forest down to the very one specific tree that you're talking about. Okay? Alright. So, here is an example. Oh no! Here is an example. Where did this go? How do I back that up? Insert video by URL. Give me 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. I want to show you the video that I made for this. Here we go. Okay, copy, paste, select. Gotta center that up, gotta make it pretty. Back to present. Okay, please let me know if you can now see the video on the slide. Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Alright, I'm going to mute my mic and hit play. If for some reason the audio is not playing on this video, please What about now? Does my mic pick it up? It's just the Star Wars music. There's no talking. All right. So you guys can hear me now, right? Okay. Good. All right, so that was an example of a Star Wars intro scroll that I made for this lesson, and there's a bit more info than you're going to include, obviously, in your paper, but I wanted it as an example of kind of the broader context of the standards down into what we would be doing in the lesson and then moving forward. So we've got some more about contextualization, but I know you guys are now like 20 minutes into this, so you're probably pretty antsy to get to the Star Wars stuff. So what I'd like for you to do is to go over to kahoot.it, kahoot.it, and put in the pin 7342385. Okay? 7342385. Oh, I'm getting X's and minuses here. Is it not working? I just had it come up with a new Kahoot code. Lucas, are you not able to access the Kahoot? I've got one player. Lucas is in there. And now we've got Stefan. All right. Drag this over here. Can you guys see the Kahoot on your own devices as well as on the computer screen? Baller. All right, let's do this. All right, question 1. What were Luke's aunt and uncle's job on Tatooine? That's going to show you the answers, isn't it? You guys can follow along on your own thing. Oh, I can show you the media. That'll work. Alright, I only got one answer, though. Both of you playing? Or does it only get the point to the first person to answer? I had never done a Kahoot with 2 people. Alright, Stefan answered first. Scored 900. Ah, Lucas got disconnected. Okay, you know what? Lucas, go ahead and try to... I will end the game real quick. Maybe? There was an end game button here a minute ago. Alright. Lucas, go ahead and use that code to reconnect with us, bud. So you're using Adobe on your phone as well as Kahoot on your phone? When I was in Chicago a couple of weeks ago, I tried to use Adobe to connect to the PLC meeting and kept having issues too. Alright, so let's do this again. Question 1. What were Luke's aunt and uncle's job on Tatooine? Give you a hint. It was not power converter salesman. Alright. Stefan nailed it again. I think you actually got one more point this time, didn't you? Next question. How many languages does C-3PO speak? Approximately. Technically, he says forms of communication, but... I think we might have lost Lucas again. The correct answer was 6 million. What is the Wookiee's home world? Kashyyyk, correct. Oh, Lucas, did you get disconnected? Let's try this one again. So, who shot first between Han and Greedo? Very good. Han did shoot first, indeed. Lucas, I'm sorry you keep getting disconnected, buddy. Correct answer is actually D, Dexter Jester. And that was his son, who played one of the Padawan that gets murdered by Anakin. So which species stole the plans to the Death Star? This would be to the second Death Star, not to the first Death Star, because, as we all know from Rogue One, it was a bunch of humans and a droid. That's right. A lot of Bothans gave their lives to these plans. Okay, question 7. Which bounty hunter in The Empire Strikes Back is wearing a costume from a Doctor Who episode? Bosk. Who was not at his post and got asked about it in A New Hope? Like, TK421, why aren't you at your post? And yes, I've been told that this quiz is a bit obtuse. What are the odds that C-3PO gives to Han for successfully navigating the asteroid field? The correct answer is 3,720 to 1. And question 10 out of 10. Who is Lando Calrissian's co-pilot in The Return of the Jedi? The strike on the second Death Star. Nienyo. And that is how you pronounce it. Well, congratulations to Stefan, who was basically playing alone. But Lucas, sorry that didn't work out. Hopefully next time we'll be able to get you in there. Alright, so obviously you guys know your Star Wars. And we do not need to spend 7 precious minutes watching the video. You did. You still nailed that second place slot. But I had a video called Star Wars in 7 minutes, and it covered 7 of the Star Wars movies in 7 minutes. So I can get you the link to that if you want, but we're going to just kind of skip that since you guys know your Star Wars. Terrorism, on the other hand, might be something you're not as familiar with. So the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, defines international terrorism as having 3 characteristics. Violent acts, or acts that are dangerous to human life, that are against the law. They are intended to intimidate or coerce the population or government. And number 3, they occur primarily outside of the U.S. That's what makes it international. So, last time I checked, blowing up the Death Star was a pretty violent act. It was intimidated to influence the policy of the government of the Empire by intimidation, and mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. Not so much the kidnapping, but they assassinated like hundreds of thousands of people. And of course, it occurred outside of the US. So let's take a look at some examples of terrorism as defined by the FBI in Star Wars. First of all, let me apologize in advance for having to talk about the prequels. They do exist, and we do have to acknowledge them as part of the canon, unfortunately. So we have examples of what is called false flag terrorism, government-sponsored terrorism, and the story of the death of the Republic through terrorist means. And we'll talk about that. In the originals, the good three, the heroes of the story are the rebellion, trying to overthrow the evil empire, and it can be argued by many that they were actually terrorists attacking the legitimately elected and informed government. So let's talk about what false flag terrorism is. So these are attacks that occur and are designed to deceive the people in such a way that it looks like they're being carried out by entities, groups, or nations other than those who actually did the deed. So the conspiracy theories that the government actually perpetrated 9/11 or allowed 9/11 to happen or even sponsored the terrorists to do it so that they could have an excuse to go to war, that's an example of a theory of false flag terrorism. And the reason for this is that it allows the person in control to seize more power. Drastic expansion of government oversight and control has happened since 9/11. So some historical and obviously conspiracy theory examples are the Bay of Pigs, Cuba, in 1961. The U.S. government attempted to invade Cuba, basically just by using the Cubans to do it. They painted planes to look like it was the Cuban Air Force who were attacking. There was the Reichstag fire in Germany in 1933 that the Nazis used. They blamed it on the communists. There's literally no evidence that it was the communists. Overwhelming evidence that it was actually carried out by the Nazis themselves. But they burned down the Parliament building, which is called a Reichstag, and blamed it on the communists as a way to make them seem like the bad guys. And then, of course, the conspiracy theory about 9/11 that we talked about. So let's look at that in Star Wars. So in the prequels, we have the unfortunate existence of Episode 1, even though it does have Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon is awesome. He's kind of offset by Jar Jar. So we have Senator Palpatine from Naboo, and we know that he is eventually going to become the Emperor and take control over everything. He's the big bad in the episodes 4 through 6. And so he arranges at the very beginning of the movie for the Trade Federation to invade Naboo and attempt to kill the Queen. And then, remember, he's a senator at this time, so there's already a Supreme Chancellor in charge of the Senate. And it makes this guy look weak, like he can't control everything. And so when Palpatine swoops in and saves everybody, quote unquote, he's able to call a vote of no confidence in the Chancellor. So in the Clone Wars, Episode 2, Palpatine basically orchestrates these separatist attacks and sparks this big civil war between the Jedi and the Republic against these separatists. So he's actually in charge of building up two armies. He builds up the clone army for the Republic, and he has the droid army that he builds up for the separatists. And then in Episode 3, he puts his plan into action with Executive Order 66. He has the clones turn on the Jedi, and when things look the most dire, he has a whole bunch of powers turned over to him, and he becomes the Chancellor Palpatine. And when the Jedi find out about all of this and bring it to light and go to arrest him, he attacks them and makes it look like it was a coup d'etat, like the Jedi were trying to overthrow the Republic, making them the bad guys. And so he actually tricked the Senate into volunteering to make him emperor and to create the First Galactic Empire and to give him all of these powers and autonomy and authority, presumably to beat the enemy at the gate. This happened in history. The city of Cincinnati is actually named after a man named Emperor Cincinnatus, who was this great general who stood up. The Senate of Rome foisted all this power onto him. He defeated the enemies, and then he stepped down and retired. And he's like, you gave me the power just to beat these guys. I'm giving the power back to the people. Deuces. And he retired to a farm. Alright, so now let's look at the original script of Star Wars Episode 4. So Luke Skywalker's character actually had a little bit different of a backstory. Or he provided the backstory in the script. So he says that the Great Senate diverted Jedi by creating civil disorder. Senate secretly instigated race wars and aided anti-government terrorists. They slowed down the system of justice to the point where an oppressive police state was welcomed. So all the way back in the 70s, when George Lucas wrote the script for the very first movie, he already had all of the prequels planned out as the backstory. And then, unfortunately, in the 90s and early thousands, he was allowed to execute it poorly. So, one of the things that happens with a lot of terrorists is that they are normal people who are then go through a process called radicalization. Right? So he's an orphaned farm boy. He doesn't know his mom. He doesn't know his dad. They're both dead. He doesn't really understand what happened or why they died. But he's living with his aunt and his uncle. And this guy, Anthony Stalesky, who wrote in the Journal of Homeland Security, he identified prime candidates for terrorist recruitment as people who come from a family where the father is absent. They have trouble forming relationships outside the home. Luke talks about knowing people and some friends outside of the home, but we don't need any of them, so that's weird. They're attracted to groups that offer acceptance and camaraderie. Notice how quickly Luke is just welcomed with open arms into the Rebels and given a commandership and an X-Wing to fly. That's pretty insane. And then, before any of this, he meets this religious fanatic. Because remember, you could consider the Jedi Code to be an old religion. He convinces Luke that he's got to leave his family and run away with him. And then he lies to him about the Empire having killed his father. And he's got a history of recruiting young boys and training them in acts of violence and a very extreme interpretation of this religion. And then when they find the bodies of Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, it's kind of the spark that lit the match there, right? So then Obi-Wan recruits a drug smuggler to get them transported, and makes himself a martyr in order to fully indoctrinate Luke. So we could consider the Rebel Alliance to meet the qualifications of a sleeper cell. Luke jumps at the chance to help the cell on Yavin 4. He says a little Jedi prayer and joins the terrorist rank by bombing a fully manned space station, killing everybody on board. So it's pretty insane how quickly this guy goes from this teenage kid to blowing up a military installation. And then, of course, they have this big medal ceremony, and everybody gets medal but Chewie. So afterwards, he meets with this extremist who trains him further in the ways of the religion. We would call this a mullah. This is someone who's well-educated and holds a high position of importance, and they train young people. And they run a madrasa, which is a place for instruction. And he, basically strips his mind bare and builds him back up in the ways of the Force. So then, in the last movie of the original series, we have The Rise of the Terrorist. And Luke now completely dismisses any other interpretations of the way the galaxy should run, as being inferior or incompatible to the Force. He rescues his fellow co-conspirator by blowing up another vehicle, killing a bunch of people who were on board just chilling. And he goes so far as to try to kill his own dad and the Emperor, the head of state. And then it convinces his dad to join the jihad. And then in the end, the rebels blow up yet another manned space station, killing hundreds of thousands more people. So, all joking aside, terrorists are willing to kill innocent people to advance their politics and their agenda. But does that mean that killing innocent people makes you a terrorist? Do you have to have the intention of killing innocents? Does your motive matter? So here are some real-life examples. In 2004, Al-Qaeda, or an Al-Qaeda-inspired group, detonate 10 bombs on commuter trains in Madrid, killing almost 200 people. Then in 2014, Israel, a state government, carpet bombs entire sections of Palestine, killing hundreds of innocent civilians, just on the chance of killing some Hezbollah terrorists. So, grab the mic if you've got one, or jump on the chat box and give me your opinion here. What's similar about these two events? What's different about them? Alright, Stefan says, while both resulted in the death of innocents, one was a direct action of a state, while the other was the action of a group of extremists. Lucas says, in both situations, innocents are killed, but in 2004, that was the point of the operation. Israel's intention was to kill their enemies, and the innocents were collateral damage. Okay, those are both good points. So, let me ask you, if Israel, which is a government, a state, had intended to kill innocent Palestinians as a way to deter the Hezbollah terrorists from further attacks, that's a direct action by the state. In that instance, they would have been intentionally targeting innocent civilians. Would that have been terrorism in your definition? Just gave me a green check. I think that means he thinks yes. John says, by my definition, that would be terrorism, but internationally, it would be a war crime of some sort. I agree. Okay. Oops, why is this repeating? Oh, okay, here we go. So, let's take a look at a little bit more detail. In 2004, the Al-Qaeda inspired group. They blew up the bombs on the trains. Their intention was to cause panic and to kill innocents with the intention of spreading fear. They attacked without warning. They aimed to kill as many people as possible, right, to try to get the government to change its mind about its involvement in the war in Iraq. In 2014, when Israel carpet-bombed Palestine, it was in response to Hamas, it was Hamas, not Hezbollah, Hamas rocket attacks. They did kill hundreds of innocents, but their intention was to destroy Hamas's defensive capabilities. There were specific military targets that they were aiming at. They didn't intend to hurt innocent Palestinians. We could probably debate whether or not they cared if they hurt any innocent Palestinians, but they did drop leaflets, use television broadcasts, radio broadcasts, newspaper articles, and text messages that the blanket sent out warning people to flee for a pretty significant amount of time before the attacks happened. So some would still consider it terrorism. Some might define it as a disproportionate response, meaning Israel did not need to respond as dramatically or violently as it did, but it did. So, now it's time to think about where you guys stand on the Death Star 2. So let me double check, make sure that this poll is working here. It should be. So if you go to a web browser and put in pollev.com/alexanderled615. Oops, I think I need to log in first. Oh goodness, what's that one? Okay. Alright, where's my activities? Here we go. Alright, can you guys go ahead and give that another try? pollev.com/Alexanderled615. I appreciate you guys being my guinea pigs here with this. I'm supposed to be able to just load this directly into the PowerPoint presentation. So if it can work, it'll be pretty cool. If not, we've got other means for making polls. You guys having any success joining the poll? Stefan, one of my favorite running jokes is that whenever somebody asks me to do something where I have to get into something, I like to go, I'm in. Like every hacker in every 1990s movie. Alright, Stefan is in. It looks like Lucas is having some trouble. Alright, Lucas is in. Huh. Interesting. Okay, well, for some reason it's not showing me the results, so we have a backup plan here. So if you would be so kind as to, I know you got to click again, vote using the poll right here in the course. I'll have to play around with poll everywhere a little bit more. Ooh, we've got an even split. Very interesting. Alright, so what we're going to do then is, normally I would put you guys into breakout groups if there were large groups of people. But instead, I'm going to have you guys work on your own contextualization real quick. Alright, so which of you said that they were rebels? Okay, means we got Lucas in group B and Stefan in group A. Alright, so those are your two teams, your two camps. Alright, so we're going to be looking a little bit more at contextualization real quick. And I know we're going to go a little bit over on time, but one thing you will find is that I am long-winded. So, remember your team. So let's look real quick at an example of a contextualization done in a push course. Okay, so the prompt is to explain the causes of the rise of tensions between American colonists and the British government in the period 1754 to 1776. Another useful skill for you guys, or at least information you should know. So, some of the options we have for contextualization. We can talk about the French and Indian War. We can talk about mercantilism. We can talk about salutary neglect, basically the concept that of taxation without representation. So here is an example of a contextualization for that prompt. In the 1600s, Parliament passed the Navigation Acts, which legislated mercantilism, controlling colonial trade for the benefit of the British Empire. Before the French and Indian War, the Navigation Acts were not enforced, and the colonists were able to trade with anyone they wished. This policy was known as salutary neglect. As long as the colonies were making money for Britain, no one cared. After the French and Indian War, the British began to see the colonies as a liability and began enforcing trade regulations and collecting taxes. Okay, so you guys see how they wove in all of these things that were occurring around the topic? Okay, now let's look at a Euro one. Evaluate the extent to which the invention of the printing press altered the lives of Europeans. So, really, the printing press occurs before our timeline of AP Euro, technically. It's like right before 1450, so we want to structure our contextualization to provide a glimpse of what was going on in Europe before the printing press was invented to provide some sort of alteration to the lives of Europeans. So this one says, during the Middle Ages, books could only be produced by hand. Medieval monks spent a great deal of their time copying a handful of ancient texts and also some popular medieval texts, such as Aquinas' Summa Theologica. These texts weren't widely produced and were very expensive, so they weren't widely read. People who had controversial new ideas about science and religion were usually burned at the stake before their work had a chance to reach a wide audience. Insert thesis. This is where you would say, that all changed with the invention of the printing press, which dramatically reduced the amount of labor and time it took to produce works of literature, and also spread people's writings across Europe much more quickly, so people's ideas were able to take root before the church had them killed. Is that making sense? Are these two examples ringing true for you? Good. Alright, so the thing we're going to do is we are going to evaluate the extent to which the actions of the Rebel Alliance could be considered those of terrorists or of freedom fighters. Okay, so your prompt, your thesis will ultimately take a side. You guys are going to try to write the whole thing. Okay, so Stefan, you're taking the side of them being freedom fighters, them being rebels, right? Lucas, you're taking the side of them being terrorists. Those are going to be your theses. So I want you to write the whole paragraph, and you're going to provide me with your best shot at contextualization. Okay? So you're going to brainstorm with your group of you. Again, I developed this for a large group, and this is what we got. But as you brainstorm, I want you to think about making sure that you are connecting things to the prompt, that they are related, and that you have specific details. Forest and the trees, guys. Make it go like this. Alright, so I want you to, you're going to be working on this for a minute or two. While you do this, I am going to play you a video. This is taken from a movie called Clerks. And your principal, Mrs. Glenn, actually really loves this movie. So I'm going to play this video for you. It's about 3.5 minutes long. I'm going to run to the restroom. Let me know if the audio doesn't play, but I want you to be brainstorming while this video plays. Think about specific things that the rebels did and how those could be construed, and start constructing your contextualization paragraph. Alright? Is everybody clear on the instructions for this activity? Stefan's a yes. Lucas, do you need some clarification? Nope, Lucas is a go. Alright, here we go.
Thanks.
You know, that article's accurate. Caitlin really is getting married.
You know what I just watched?
Me pulling a can off some moron's fist?
Return of the Jedi.
Didn't you hear me? Caitlin is really getting married.
What did you like better, Jedi or The Empire Strikes Back?
Empire.
Blasphemy.
Empire had the better ending. I mean, Luke gets his hand cut off, finds out Vader's his father, hand gets frozen, taken away by Boba Fett. It ends on such a down note. I mean, that's what life is, a series of down endings. All Jedi had was a bunch of Muppets.
There was something else going on in Jedi. I never noticed it till today. They built another Death Star, right?
Yeah.
Now, the first one was completed and fully operational before the rebels destroyed it.
Luke blew it up. Give credit where credit's due.
And the second one was still being built when they blew it up.
Compliments of Lando Calrissian.
Something just never sat right with me that second time around. I could never put my finger on it, but something just wasn't right.
And you figured it out.
The first Death Star was manned by the Imperial Army. The only people on board were stormtroopers, dignitaries, Imperials.
Basically.
So when they blew it up, no problem. Evil's punished.
And the second time around?
The second time around, it wasn't even done being built yet. It was still under construction.
So?
So a construction job of that magnitude would require a hell of a lot more manpower than the Imperial Army had to offer. I'll bet they brought independent contractors in on that thing. Plumbers, aluminum siders, roofers.
Not just Imperials, is that what you're getting at?
Exactly. In order to get it built quickly and quietly, they'd hire anybody that can do the job. Think the average stormtrooper knows how to install a toilet main? All they know is killing in white uniforms.
All right, so they bring in independent contractors. Why are you so upset at its destruction?
All those innocent contractors brought in to do the job were killed. Casualties of a war they had nothing to do with. All right, look. You're a roofer. Some juicy government contract comes your way. You got a wife and kids, the two-story in suburbia. This is a government contract, which means all sorts of benefits. Along come these left-wing militants and blast everything within a 3-mile radius with their lasers. You didn't ask for that. You have no personal politics. You're just trying to scrape out a living.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but what are you talking about?
The ending of Return of the Jedi.
My friend here is trying to convince me that any independent contractors who were working on the uncompleted Death Star were innocent victims when it was destroyed by the rebels.
Well, I'm a contractor myself. I'm a roofer. Done and ready home improvements. And speaking as a roofer, I can tell you a roofer's personal politics comes into play heavily when choosing jobs.
Like when?
3 weeks ago, I was offered a job up in the hills. Beautiful house, tons of property, a simple reshingling job. They told me if I could finish it in 1 day, I would double my price. Then I realized whose house it was.
Whose house was it?
Dominic Bambino's.
Babyface Bambino? The gangster?
The same. The money was right, but the risk was too high. I knew who he was, and based on that, I turned the job over to a friend of mine.
Based on personal politics.
Right, and the next week, the Foresi family put a hit on Babyface's house. My friend was shot and killed. Didn't even finish reshingling.
No way.
I'm alive because I knew the risk involved in that particular client. My friend wasn't so lucky. Any contractor working on that Death Star knew the risk involved. If they got killed, it's their own fault. A roofer listens to this, not his wallet.
Guys, time to check in. Do you still need a few more minutes to finish writing your contextualization? Okay. I got one more video. This one's a music video to play for you. Here's a tip. Start with your thesis. Write your thesis statement first, what your argument is, and then figure out how you're going to work your way down. Keep in mind the scroll from Empire Strikes Back, where they introduced what was going on at the galactic level, and kind of narrowed it down from there. Okay, so I'm going to play this other video real quick. It's a quick music video, and when we're done, we'll be able to share our contextualizations. Guys, I'm just show me what you've got. Don't worry if it's not any good. I mean, that's the whole point of this, is learning from our mistakes. Gotta start somewhere, right? Trust me, I have read plenty of bad excuses for contextualization. I highly doubt either one of you is going to write the worst version I've ever seen. So, just keep that in mind. Feel free to share your contextualization attempt in the chat box there. All right. Stefan wrote, "The galaxy is in turmoil. An authoritarian regime has seized power from the original republic and has an iron grip on the affairs of the people. A rebellion rises up against the Empire in an effort to restore freedom to the galaxy. The rebels were not terrorists because they were in open conflict with the Empire and attacked military targets." That's pretty good. Solid thesis statement. I would add in just a few more specifics to your contextualization, but I really liked how you started at the galactic level and then focused specifically on the government level, okay? And then you focus even more specifically on the rebellion, which you then segue into your thesis. All right, Lucas writes, "In the Star Wars universe," I thought they were in our universe. I think it's real. In the Star Wars universe, the Galactic Empire eliminated their ideological enemies, the Jedi, and established near draconian rule over many star systems. Eventually, this led to the Resistance in the form of some senators, the Organas and others, covertly sponsoring a revival of the old Jedi ways, seeking out the old zealot Obi-Wan Kenobi. Together, they radicalized youth in the galactic frontier, leading them in a string of violent acts culminating in the destruction of a military base in order to intimidate the Empire. These tactics led to the Rebel Alliance becoming a very dangerous terrorist cell within the Empire. Nailed it. Okay? Stefan, notice how he includes a lot of specific information about the who's and the what's. So, excellent work, both of you guys. Do you feel like you have a little bit better grasp of the contextualization point? I know that you're probably not going to write about the Galactic Empire when it comes time for the AP exam. At least I hope you don't. But I think you guys are both well on the way to earning that point on exam day. Here are some sources. And I hope that I know at least one of you has already gone in and completed the contextualization practice in that essay skills module, and that is an opportunity for you to put this skill to the test by actually creating your own Star Wars scroll. So if you haven't done that yet, feel free to hop in there and get that done. I think you guys are both have both been great participants today. What I'd like for you to do is to decline that call real quick. Click on this file here down at the bottom. It is labeled AP Star Wars Post Lesson Collaboration Form.docx. Okay, so download that form, open it in Word, fill it out for me real quick, submit that as the collaboration assignment on Canvas. Make sure you include the date and the time of the live lesson, and you will be officially good to go. I think that was those were my only Star Wars music videos for this one. Next time I'll get you again. But do you guys have any other questions, concerns, or comments? Lucas, it's a doc file. You're on your phone though, right? So you might not be able to download it. Tell you what, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to download it myself onto this computer. It's just the two of you guys. I'm going to email you the document. Go to Canvas, go to Inbox. Not a problem at all. Anything else that I can help you guys with today before I let you go? All right. Well, you guys have been great. Thank you so much for coming. Next semester, we're going to be kicking off doing this weekly. It won't always be Star Wars or as entertaining, but every, I think, Wednesday, we're going to switch to Wednesdays, because my daughter's dance is switching to Wednesdays. Every Wednesday, I think from 4 to 5, we're going to do this, and we'll be throwing in some Saturday sessions and some sessions every once in a while on different days for people who can't make Wednesdays. Yeah, so we will be doing all these sessions in order to help you guys get prepped. And bear with me, I am stalling in order to make sure that I send this document to you. Downloads. And sent. Alright, it is sending right now. It is now message sent official. So whenever you get that file, go ahead and fill it out and submit it for the collaboration. And if there's anything else I can do to help you guys before the break, just shoot me a text or an email or give me a call before this time tomorrow. Alright. All you got to do to get out of here is click the X in the corner, or Lucas, you just got to close the app and you guys are good to go. I'll catch you after the break. Have a nice holiday. Stefan, you've raised your hand. How may I help you, sir? Oh. All right, bud. Have a good one.